It's time to talk about Balenciaga, the high fashion company. Now, you know me, I don't care one iota about fashion. I still dress like a 2000s era slacker. But even an outsider like me knows that all these fashionistas, both within Balenciaga and elsewhere, are all artsy-fartsy. That's why you get women walking down the runway, dressed up like Christmas trees and avocados and Cousin It. So it's no surprise to anybody that when rumblings of some weird stuff coming out of Balenciaga began to hit the scene, the initial reaction was to basically just handwave it. They're just auteurs, guys. They're always avant-garde and whatever. Don't worry about it. And that was pretty much how I treated it. Just another dumb event coming out of a community that is known for dumb events. A community that I personally couldn't care less about. Oh boy, how wrong I was. Let's take the deep dive. It all began with these viral images, featuring children posting with BDSM teddy bears. I don't know if they were just selling BDSM teddies, or if they were selling fetish clothes for teddies, or if the fetish gear is for children, but they weren't going to model it on kids in the pictures after all, so they put it on teddies instead. All I know is that it looks really, really weird. You've got kids hanging out with wine and drugs and equipment with sexual undertones. This is all very sus. Part of that same photo shoot included this picture. No kids this time, but instead just a messy desk with a purse. However, if you zoom in on the half-concealed papers on the desk, you'll discover something quite interesting about them. The paper is a printout of the Supreme Court ruling Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition, a 2002 case which struck down parts of the 1996 Child Porn Prevention Act, criminalizing virtual CP, meaning content where no real child was actually harmed, but nonetheless did portray fake children being harmed. We're talking about lolly here, guys. Though the suit was brought primarily by the porn industry, which at that time was engaged in a trend of taking above-age models who looked young, putting them in high school uniforms, and making porn videos that appeared to star high school girls, other interests also objected, stating that, for example, because Romeo and Juliet starred a 14-year-old girl in-universe in the lead role, the law was written such that it would criminalize putting on that play, even if Juliet was played by a clearly adult woman. And this is what that background paper was in the Balenciaga photo shoot. A copy of Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition, where part of the US's child porn laws were struck down. Why that? Why did it have to be that specific paper, guys? Did you just happen to have it printed out for some reason? Like, oh shit, we need some papers real quick to make this photo work. Here you go, I got these lying around. Why did they have these? Or did they purposely print these out? And if so, why? So this went viral, and after Balenciaga realized that their entire brand was currently in the process of burning to the ground, they decided to sue the guy who directed the photo shoot, Gabriele Galimberti. The claim was, Balenciaga just didn't know. It was all Galimberti's fault, and because of some mistake, the photo shoot was approved without the higher-ups knowing what was going on. After Balenciaga began to try and divert attention to Galimberti, the internet quickly picked up this article he had shared on social media. Why restrict child porn but not guns? Now, everyone thinks he wrote the article, but he did not. He only shared it, but the article is also a little sus. The article makes the point that America has a restriction on the First Amendment when it comes to child pornography, because children are harmed. And by that logic, America should also have a restriction on the Second Amendment, because children are also harmed. And the article presents statistics, showing that more children die from gun violence than on-duty cops or soldiers. The argument in the article is that if we allow guns despite this harm that comes to children in the name of rights, then we should also allow child pornography for the same reason. It's very much a Voschian, we must be consistent and allow child porn if we benefit from child labor type of argument. I get what he's saying, but it's probably the worst fucking possible way to say it. Another Balenciaga ad featured a similarly messy desk, this time with the background showing a book written by Michael Bormans. Jesus, this dude has to have an ego. Generally, the spine of a book has the title as its largest font, not the author. Michael Bormans is a Belgian painter, photographer, and filmmaker who is reasonably prolific, but after the internet began to autistically scour every single Balenciaga photo for more hidden pedo secrets, they discovered that Bormans, back in 2018, put on an art exhibition in Hong Kong titled Fire from the Sun, featuring paintings of naked toddlers and young children covered in blood and engaged in some very strange behavior. It's not overtly sexual, but it does range between violent and revolting. And then there's the case of Lotta Volkova, who at one point worked for Balenciaga as a designer. After her part in all of this went viral, mainstream media quickly moved to report that she's not currently working for Balenciaga, guys. Stop looking into everyone, please. And of course, Volkova's Instagram is now private, but the internet never forgets. Her account was filled with photos of children in simulated positions of distress, children with simulated abuse, at least I hope it's simulated. Stuff that is, again, not overtly sexual, but is really sus. Oh yeah, she's also doing the BDSM teddy bear thing too. Volkova's boyfriend, I think, they've got some kind of relationship at least, is Gosha Rubchinsky, who is another fashion designer. This guy's got allegations from back in 2018, where text messages leaked showing him asking 2 underage boys to send him nudes. Robczynski's defense was that he was simply recruiting models for his next shoot, and he needed them to send him pictures. Robczynski hasn't directly worked with Balenciaga as far as I can tell, but he has collaborated with a lot of notables at Balenciaga on his own projects, including Volkova. Another close friend of the duo is Demna Gvasalia, who looks like a cross between Zelensky and that dude from the Orville. He's a lead designer at Balenciaga, and you can find his work with them on both his Instagram and the company's official social media. Like this video, where he designed a carrying bag that came with a fake bloody fetus in it. Gvasalia outright stated in an interview that Lotta, Gosha, and I grew up on child porn and radiation from Chernobyl, which is why we're all so fucked up. You know, there might be something to this. You nuke Japan and then you get the weirdest porn imaginable. Hell, check out these 2 maps showing radioactive fallout from Chernobyl in Sweden and the most popular porn categories in that same country. The CEO of Balenciaga's parent company, Kering, sells child sex dolls. I probably can't show you this image, but it's a toddler with a fleshlight for a mouth and an erect cock for a nose. You know, considering that Kanye's appearance on Alex Jones was one of the most batshit things I have seen in a long time, the fact that he wore a Balenciaga gimp mask during that appearance is probably the least crazy Balenciaga news story right now. And that really says something. Maybe one of the reasons Kanye doesn't see his daughter no more is because he made her wear a Balenciaga gimp mask too. And listen, yeah, I know I didn't complete the Kanye interview during the gangbang stream. You can blame all my guests for that. There were too many. I'll make it up to you. I'll give it another go in the next couple days, so stay tuned. The reply from the left has been deafening. For the amount of canceling they've done over 10-year-old, 15-year-old tweets, canceling streamers, YouTubers, PewDiePie, canceling game devs like the dude behind Five Nights at Freddy's from being pro-life, canceling people for making sexy drawings of adult characters, canceling people for objecting to 2020's Summer of Love, nobody is coming out and talking about this Balenciaga shit. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. Check out everybody's favorite girl bosses over at The View.
So there's growing anti-LGBTQ sentiment right now, and how it's being framed is as portraying, trans people as groomers. This is a term you'll hear on the far right. They're groomers. This is where you get the anti-drag queen stuff that we're seeing. So Balenciaga played right into their hands by having kids in a sexualized manner, carrying something that represents, sex acts. I think it was a really bad misstep at a moment where it's just kind of a dangerous time to even give credence to those kind of insane takes.
How fucking culture war brain rotted do you have to be when your take is the Balenciaga discourse is bad because it gives ammo to the right wing's groomer allegations? They don't even care about the possibility of actual groomed kids. They only care if their political opponents have a point. And this is where we get to the shoe on head part of the video, where all of her breadtube associates backstabbed her and dragged her through the mud for exactly this reason. For those of you who don't know the deep lore, here's the TLDR. You've got old 2014 era Skype groups, me and Sargon and Shu and Arch and V, and other guys like Kraut and Mundane Matt and Harmful Opinions and Armor Skeptic. We were the old anti-SJWs, and we all kind of orbited around each other and occasionally collabed and voice chatted and stuff like that. Over the years, the group broke apart. A bunch of them went radically progressive. Another group became conservatives, and a few of them just went off to do their own thing. As I personally understand the story, Shu decided breadtube was a better place for her content and her audience. So these old friendships ended as a prerequisite of Vosh helping to rehab her image in the eyes of the online left. We all said to her in private, Shu, your new friends are snakes. They will throw you under the bus because while you are a socialist, you're also a nationalist, and your unique view of politics in the 21st century will eventually lead to you clashing with them. She disagreed, and she was wrong. We predicted the backstabbing, and Balenciaga was when the knives came out. Shu's got a long history of making content uncovering pedophiles, in good honor. She's covered pro-pedo groups and events running the entire political spectrum, from the MAP activism and pedo as LGBT shit on the left, to the child pageants and underage marriages and virginity pledges on the right. For her, covering the Balenciaga weirdness on her Twitter is exactly the kind of thing she would do. And Shu is the reason this story blew up at all, because the New York Post took her initial digging and ran with it, dragging it into the mainstream news cycle. By the way, she was humorously credited as an eagle-eyed social media watchdog. But alas, being aggressively anti-pedo was just too much for her breadtube friends. I guess that is their line. Okay, let me try to steelman their position, as funny as it is. The Balenciaga story went viral at the exact same time as the Club Q shooting, which I covered over on the Tubcast, where a person shot up a gay bar in Colorado. As a result of that event, the online left was in hyper-alert mode. They were blaming the right's constant groomer discourse machine as radicalizing the Club Q shooter. And so, even if you're pointing out legitimately sus shit with children, it was considered ammo for the right. It did not matter to these people if actual children might be harmed. Talking about it fueled the groomer discourse machine, and therefore, you're anti-LGBT. In essence, breadtube took up the position of that woman on The View, only a lot more blatantly. Here's Xanderhal. She-Won-Head is on her way to once again use her massive platform to provide the neo-Nazis in her audience with fodder they can use to justify the murder of gay people, but this time the day after another anti-gay terror attack. This is pure retardation. What does pedophilia have to do with anti-LGBT stuff, Xanderhal? Why can't Shu point out sus shit with kids just because Club Q also happened? He did a whole video on it, which is also full of retardation. Demon Mama did something similar, only her video was over an hour, and she is significantly more insufferable, which is incredible since she's being compared to Xanderhal. Demon Mama's been nipping at Shu's heels for months now, though, long before Balenciaga. The argument Shu's making in this discussion is that ever since the yearly Pride discourse became all about exposing kids to kink and drag, that the LGBT community and its activism has become harder and harder to support. Demon Mama's reply is simultaneously a mix of "it doesn't happen" and "it does happen and it's good" and "what about Hooters" and "you need to be more responsible with your platform." Vadim calls Shu talking about the Balenciaga pedo story a conspiracy on par with QAnon and Pizzagate. Lance is saying Shu is causing a gay and trans panic for talking about it. The only person to remain publicly silent about it is Vosh, presumably because he was the reason she got back in with the online left in the first place. Listen, you can feel free to disbelieve me here, but even I know people who know people, and from what I hear, Vosh heavily regrets just how much he's stuck his neck out for Shu over the years. I don't know why, dude. I think she's correct. Being anti-pedophilia, even in the face of Club Q, should not be a hard choice to make. The last time those two even spoke publicly beyond just memeing was part of that Demon Mama conversation, where Vosh, with kid gloves, says that Shu is using her platform irresponsibly to talk about the weird pedo shit on the left. And Shu exasperatedly replies, "I just feel like I'm going insane." Hey, me too, buddy. But at least it isn't because of the people and the politics that I've thrown my lot in with. There is a strain of leftist political thought that is expressly pro-pedophilic. I will have to go into it in another video, one that is a bit more serious than this, but the TLDR of it is, after World War II, one of the prevailing theories regarding why voting populations sometimes vote in a fascist party that oppresses them and destroys democracy is due to sexual repression. I spoke about this a little in my 3 Forms of Fascism video. Wilhelm Reich believed that growing up in a society thick with traditional sexual morals leads to sexually repressed adults, who will vote for fascist parties if given the chance, and the best form of anti-fascism was normalizing a new progressive sexual morality. The Italian communist Mario Mieli took this idea to its extreme, believing that adults having sex with children would combat this sexual repression, leading them to grow into sexually open and free adults themselves with a personality that was explicitly anti-fascist. The postmodern giants, Foucault and Derrida, along with many other French leftist thinkers, were influenced by Reich and Mieli, declaring that total political equality also required equality between age groups, just as it did between races and sexes. And they famously petitioned the French government to repeal age of consent laws, believing that a march towards a progressive, socialist, leftist utopian vision of the future also required dismantling all restrictions on human sexual activity. Foucault and Derrida's specific views on the interplay between consent and socialism would be repeated by Vosh in 2018, where he said that as socialism addresses power imbalances, the age of consent should be lowered. The point I'm getting at is, you can trace a clear line from Freudian anti-fascism to modern pedophile activism that has captivated a component of the left. Obviously not the whole left. There are many people on the left, like Shu for example, who are horrified at what's slowly being normalized. But leftist philosophy doesn't have a bulwark against this sort of subversion, and leftists have to rely on fundamentally right-wing sensibilities, like tradition, or decency, or disgust responses, in order to object. The only leftist value that can be appealed to be anti-pedophilia, is harm reduction. And if you can logic twist your brain into thinking that a child isn't harmed by having sex with them, like all of those leftists I mentioned earlier did, then there's no leftist argument against it. Harm is a good argument, but it's not the only one. The problem for people like Shu is, all of the other arguments exist firmly outside of the leftist view of the world. Anyway, after everything came out about Balenciaga, they retracted that $25 million lawsuit. It became pretty clear that this isn't just some one photographer's fault, but it's something deeper within their company's culture. Balenciaga seems to be done. It's always possible they shut up for a few months, let the storm blow over, and then just come back with the rebranding. That sometimes happens after a canceling event. But they could also just be permanently tanked. That happens too. The wider issue is, normalization is the process of making the abnormal normal. Representation is the act of making something present that is otherwise absent. When these people are normalizing and representing pedophilic imagery, the question you've got to ask is, why? It's not so much that these specific images are extremely pedophilic or anything. The child isn't naked, no one's having sex with her, and yet it tickles something at the back of your brain. And the question, why is this photo being taken in this way, is that tickle. That might be their artsy-fartsy intent. Auteurs have been subverting expectations for decades longer than that phrase became a meme. And I think that that's what a lot of conservatives are getting at with their objections to the drag queen story hour events that are not actually sexual ones. Yeah, there are some events where it's clearly sexual, and that's evil. There are some events where the drag queen ended up being discovered as being some kind of pedo, that's also really bad. But I mean those events where nothing bad's actually going on. The question they're asking is, why does a drag queen want an audience of children? Nothing overtly bad is actually happening here. Nobody's being abused or anything like that. You can do this sort of thing if you want to. But the million-dollar question is, why do you want to? That's a question nobody wants to ask, and nobody wants to answer. Another close friend of the duo is Denma Gvasalia. Another close friend of the duo is Demna Gvasalia. Another close friend of the duo is Another close friend of the duo is Demna Gvasla. Jesus Christ. Another close friend of the two is Demna Holy shit. Another close friend of the two is Demna Gvasalia. Demna Gvasalia. Another close friend of the duo is Demna Fuck!